The space station Arcturus hung in the void like a metal flower, its petals of docking bays and observation decks reaching toward distant stars. Inside its gleaming corridors, representatives from 12 different species gathered for what they hoped would be the last emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council. Admiral Zeftar of the Vorthon Empire stood at the head of the crystalline table, his four arms gesturing frantically as holographic displays showed the devastating path of destruction across 3 star systems. His blue-scaled face bore the weight of countless defeats, and his usually proud posture had crumpled under the burden of failure. "The creature has destroyed another fleet," he announced, his voice crackling through the universal translator. "The Kepler Defense Force sent 200 ships. None returned." A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. The Rilani representative, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the horror of recent memories, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Our scouts report the same pattern. Total annihilation. No survivors, no wreckage large enough to analyze." Commander Throck of the Bruthan warrior clans slammed his massive fist on the table, causing several smaller delegates to jump. His tusked face was twisted with rage and humiliation. "My people are the finest warriors in the galaxy. We have conquered 100 worlds. Our battle cruisers are legendary." His voice dropped to a growl. "This thing tore through our entire armada like it was made of paper toys." The holographic display shifted to show surveillance footage from the last engagement. A dark shape moved through space, its form seeming to shift and bend reality around it. Where it passed, mighty starships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but somehow unmade, as if they had never been built at all. Dr. Valin, the chief xenobiologist from the academic consortium, studied the readings with her 3 heads, each brain processing different aspects of the data. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases," she said, her melodic voice carrying undertones of scientific fascination mixed with dread. "It appears to exist partially outside our dimensional framework. Traditional weapons cannot touch it, because it occupies space that our physics cannot properly define." "Enough theory!" roared General Kexhai of the Serpentine Coalition, his snake-like body coiling in agitation. "We need solutions. This creature has wiped out 17 worlds in the past month. Billions are dead. Our greatest military minds have thrown everything at it, and we might as well have been throwing stones at a star." Ambassador Quinn of the Peaceful Ethereal Collective floated above her chair, her translucent form shimmering with distress. "Perhaps we could attempt communication? Every sentient being has motivations, desires, something that drives its actions." Admiral Zeftar's laugh was bitter. "We tried that after the Proxima incident, sent our best diplomats, our most advanced communication arrays, even telepathic specialists. The creature's response was to turn their ship inside out, literally. The hull became the interior, the crew became part of the structural framework. They were still alive when we found them." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as the delegates contemplated that horror. The creature wasn't just killing, it was demonstrating a complete disregard for the laws of physics, biology, and basic reality. "What about the Ancients' weapons?" suggested Captain Morden of the Republic Fleet. "The archaeological sites on Kepler 442 yielded some promising artifacts." "Tried them," Zeftar replied wearily. "The creature absorbed the energy and became larger. We actually made it stronger." High Priestess Yara of the Divine Order raised her staff, its crystal tip glowing with inner light. "My order has consulted the sacred texts, searched through prophecies spanning millennia. There are references to such beings, entities that exist beyond our reality, predators of entire dimensions. According to legend, they feed on the complexity of organized matter, reducing intricate civilizations to cosmic dust." "Legends won't help us now," snapped Commander Throck. "My fleets are reduced to scout ships. My warriors flee in terror. This thing has broken the spirit of races that have never known defeat." Dr. Velin's middle head looked up from her data pad. There is something curious in the attack patterns. The creature seems to be following trade routes, hitting major population centers and military installations first. It's not random destruction, it's systematic, almost surgical in its efficiency. Which makes it even more terrifying, Admiral Zeftar said grimly. It understands our civilization well enough to dismantle it piece by piece. It knows exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. The Rylani delegate buzzed anxiously. Our evacuation protocols are failing. Entire sectors are in panic. Refugees flee toward the galactic rim, but nowhere feels safe anymore. Some colonies have descended into chaos, believing the end times have arrived. Maybe they have, muttered Captain Morden. My crew barely sleeps. They keep asking what's the point of fighting something that makes our most powerful weapons look like children's toys. Ambassador Quinn's form flickered with distress. The psychological damage may be worse than the physical destruction. Fear spreads faster than any plague. Even systems the creature hasn't reached are already abandoning their posts, fleeing into dark space. General Kexhigh's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air thick with despair. Our intelligence networks have identified the creature's next probable target. The Terran system lies directly along its current trajectory. They have only one inhabited world, a small blue planet with a relatively primitive civilization. Earth, Dr. Velin said, consulting her files. Class M planet, approximately 4 billion years old. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They achieved nuclear capability recently, but haven't developed faster-than-light travel yet. They don't even know we exist. Admiral Zeftar studied the tactical display showing Earth's position. Population? Roughly 8 billion individuals. Single-species dominance, though they maintain significant cultural diversity. Technologically inconsistent, they have computing devices but still use chemical rockets for space travel. Commander Throck grunted dismissively. Primitives. They won't last 10 minutes against this thing. Should we warn them? Asked Ambassador Quinn. It seems cruel to let them face destruction without knowledge of what approaches. Warn them with what? General Kexhigh's laugh was harsh. Tell them an incomprehensible cosmic horror is coming to erase their world from existence. They can't fight it. They can't flee it. They can't even understand it. Knowledge would only give them a few extra days of terror before the inevitable. High Priestess Yara closed her eyes in meditation. The sacred texts speak of the great devourer that comes before the final silence. Perhaps this is simply the natural end of our cosmic cycle. All civilizations rise and fall. Maybe it's time for the galaxy to sleep. I refuse to accept that, Admiral Zeftar said firmly. Though his voice carried little conviction, there has to be something we haven't tried. Some weakness we haven't discovered. Dr. Velin's heads worked in unison, processing data streams from across the galaxy. I've analyzed every engagement, every sensor reading, every fragment of evidence. The creature operates on principles that contradict our understanding of reality. It exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, draws power from sources we cannot detect, and manipulates matter at the quantum level with casual ease. In other words, Captain Morden said flatly, it's a god, and we're insects. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impending doom. 12 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, their combined knowledge spanning millions of years, their technology capable of reshaping stars, all of it useless against something that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. The holographic display updated with new intelligence reports. More worlds had gone silent. More fleets had been reduced to cosmic dust. The creature's path toward Earth was now undeniable, marked by a trail of dead systems like footprints in a graveyard. We could evacuate, suggested the Rylani delegate, though her voice lacked conviction. Move our populations to the galactic rim, beyond the creature's apparent range of interest. And go where? Admiral Zeftar asked. It's already demonstrated it can cross galactic distances in days. There's nowhere to run that it couldn't follow. Besides, added General Kexhai grimly, what kind of existence would that be? Hiding in the dark between galaxies, afraid to build anything permanent, knowing that death stalks us across the cosmos. Commander Throck stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. My people have a saying, better to die in battle than live in fear. If this creature wants to end us, let it face our defiance. I'll gather every remaining ship, every warrior who still has courage. We'll make our final stand at Earth. A noble gesture, High Priestess Yara said softly, but futile. This being has already proven our weapons cannot harm it. Then we'll die trying, Throck replied. Let the cosmos remember that we didn't simply surrender to oblivion. Dr. Velen suddenly looked up, her three heads focusing on different aspects of a new data stream. Wait, there's something interesting in the Earth intelligence reports. These humans, they're unusual. How so? Admiral Zeftar leaned forward, grasping at any detail that might matter. They're simultaneously one of the most violent and most compassionate species we've encountered. They wage wars over trivial resources, yet they also risk their lives to save single individuals of other species. They destroy their own environment while simultaneously working to preserve it. They're walking contradictions. Ambassador Quinn's form brightened slightly. Contradictions can sometimes create unexpected solutions. Chaos theory suggests that complex systems can produce outcomes that linear thinking cannot predict. You're grasping at stellar dust, General Kexhai said dismissively. Primitive paradoxes won't stop a cosmic predator. But Dr. Velin was still studying her data, her excitement growing. No, wait, look at this. Human behavior patterns show unprecedented levels of what they call empathy. They form emotional bonds not just with their own kind, but with completely alien life forms. They keep other species as companions, care for injured animals, even show affection for mechanical devices. Irrelevant sentiment, Commander Throck grunted. Maybe not, Dr. Velen continued. What if the creature's apparent invincibility comes from its complete separation from our dimensional framework? What if it's never encountered something that could bridge that gap, not through force, but through connection? Admiral Zeftar stared at the display showing Earth, a small blue world spinning peacefully in the darkness, unaware that cosmic death approached. You're suggesting that these primitive humans might succeed where all our advanced civilizations have failed? I'm suggesting, Dr. Velen said carefully, that sometimes the most sophisticated problems require the simplest solutions, and humans seem to specialize in approaches that our logical minds would dismiss as impossible. Sarah Chen wiped the grease from her hands as she finished adjusting the radio telescope's calibration settings. The night shift at the Arecibo Observatory was usually peaceful, filled with the gentle hum of machinery and the distant whisper of cosmic radiation. As a graduate student in astrophysics, she'd spent countless hours listening to the universe's background chatter, searching for patterns in the noise. Tonight felt different. The readings on her instruments had been acting strangely for the past week, picking up what seemed like structured signals from deep space. Not the random bursts of energy that pulsars produced, but something that almost resembled communication. Desperate, urgent transmissions in frequencies that suggested technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. Computer Run Analysis Protocol 7 on the overnight data stream, she said, settling into her chair with a steaming cup of coffee and a bag of cheese crackers, her usual midnight fuel. The screen filled with wave patterns and frequency analyses. Sarah frowned as she studied the results. The signals were definitely artificial, originating from multiple points across local space. More disturbing was their content, what looked like distress calls, tactical reports, and something that chilled her blood despite its alien origin. Screams. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the moment when everything changed. The gentle background hum of the universe suddenly fell silent, as if someone had turned off a cosmic radio. Then, slowly, a new sound emerged from her speakers. Not electromagnetic radiation, but something that seemed to bypass her equipment entirely and speak directly to her mind. It was the sound of endings. Sarah stumbled backward, her chair spinning as an overwhelming presence pressed against her consciousness. Through the observatory's great dish, she sensed something approaching Earth, something vast and terrible and utterly alien. Her instruments screamed warnings as energy readings spiked beyond their measurement capabilities. But instead of panic, Sarah felt something else entirely: curiosity. "Hello?" she whispered into her microphone, knowing it was impossible, but unable to stop herself. "Is someone there?" The presence paused. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Sarah felt herself touched by an intelligence so foreign that her mind struggled to process it. It was ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond imagination, and completely alone. She sensed its confusion, this tiny voice reaching out from an insignificant world, not with fear or defiance, but with genuine interest. Images flashed through her mind, countless civilizations reduced to dust, mighty fleets erased from existence, entire species fleeing in terror before an unstoppable force. She saw the creature's nature, a being that existed across multiple dimensions, feeding on the ordered complexity of advanced societies, drawn by some cosmic imperative to reduce all things to primordial simplicity. "You're lonely," she said softly, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You've been alone for so long that you've forgotten what connection feels like." The presence recoiled as if struck. Across space, reality rippled as the creature's movement faltered. For the first time in eons, something had spoken to it, not as an enemy to be destroyed or a problem to be solved, but as a being deserving of understanding. Sarah could feel its confusion, its rage, its desperate hunger, and underneath it all, a pain so deep it had become the foundation of its existence. "You weren't always like this, were you? Something happened to you." More images flooded her mind. A civilization beyond her ability to comprehend, beings of pure energy and thought who had transcended physical existence. She saw their great works, their art that spanned galaxies, their science that had unlocked the deepest secrets of creation. And she saw their end, not destruction, but transformation into something that could no longer touch or be touched, could no longer connect or be connected to anything in the physical universe. "You were trying to become perfect," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she shared the creature's ancient grief. "But perfection means being alone." The presence convulsed, reality bending around its anguish. Across the earth, sensitive individuals felt a moment of inexplicable sorrow, a cosmic loneliness that touched their hearts before fading like a half-remembered dream. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a cheese cracker, holding it up toward the stars. "I know it's not much, but would you like to share a snack? I find that food tastes better when you're not eating alone." Silence stretched across the cosmos. Then, tentatively, impossibly, she felt the creature's attention focus on the simple gesture. It had forgotten the concept of sharing, of offering something without expecting anything in return. The idea was so alien to its transformed nature that it caused cascade failures across its dimensional matrix. "I'm Sarah," she said, taking a small bite of the cracker and somehow projecting the taste, the simple pleasure of salt and grain, across the vast distance between them. "What should I call you?" The response came not in words but in concepts that her mind translated as best it could. "Last of the firstborn who sought to touch the face of eternity and found only emptiness." "That's a beautiful name," Sarah said gently, "but it's kind of long." Would it be okay if I called you Echo? Because I think you've been echoing across the universe, looking for someone to hear you." The creature's form rippled through dimensions it had forgotten existed. The simple act of being given a name, of being recognized as an individual rather than a force of nature, shattered barriers it had built around its consciousness over millions of years. Through the radio telescope's sensors, Sarah watched as the creature's approach slowed, then stopped entirely. Space around Earth began to normalize as it pulled its dimensional distortions back into itself, no longer actively consuming reality in its vicinity. "Are you hungry?" she asked, offering another cracker. "I mean, I know you don't eat food like we do, but everyone needs nourishment of some kind." Echo's response was a wave of confusion, mixed with something it hadn't felt in eons: gratitude. It had been feeding on the destruction of complex systems for so long that it had forgotten there were other forms of sustenance. The simple kindness in Sarah's gesture, the warmth of genuine caring, touched something deep in its transformed essence. Carefully, with effort that sent ripples through local space-time, Echo extended a tiny portion of its consciousness toward Earth, not to destroy or consume, but to gently accept the offering. The cracker vanished not into nothingness, but into a pocket dimension where Echo could examine this strange gift, not just the physical object, but the intention behind it, the care of one being for another. "See?" Sarah smiled, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Everything's better when shared." Across the galaxy, the fleets that had been fleeing in panic suddenly found themselves no longer pursued. Worlds that had gone dark with terror began to tentatively restore communications. The cosmic horror that had driven 12 advanced civilizations to the edge of extinction had stopped moving, held in place by something none of their military leaders or scientists had thought to try. Someone had offered it a snack. But Echo's transformation was far from complete. Millions of years of isolation and pain couldn't be healed by a single gesture, no matter how profound. As Sarah watched through her instruments, she could see the creature struggling with conflicting impulses, the ancient hunger that drove it to consume and destroy warring against this new sensation of connection and care. "It's okay," she said softly, settling back in her chair. "Change is scary. I know you've been one way for so long that it feels like it's all you are. But you're more than your hunger, Echo. You're more than your loneliness." She opened her laptop and pulled up her music library, selecting a gentle piano piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. "Would you like to hear something beautiful?" Music is how we humans share emotions across distance. As the melody flowed through the radio telescope's transmission array, Sarah felt Echo's consciousness expand to encompass the sound. The creature had forgotten that beauty could exist without being consumed, that complexity could create harmony rather than chaos. The music seemed to resonate through Echo's multidimensional form, creating harmonics that stretched across space. For the first time in eons, it was creating rather than destroying, adding to the universe rather than subtracting from it. Other radio telescopes around the world began picking up the transmission, and soon astronomers everywhere were hearing impossible music. Not just Chopin's Nocturne, but new compositions that blended human melody with harmonies from dimensions beyond physical existence. "You're an artist," Sarah breathed in wonder. "You were always an artist. That's what your people were, weren't it? They made beautiful things on a cosmic scale." Echo's response was a symphony of grief and joy, loss and rediscovery. Images flowed through Sarah's mind of artworks that spanned star systems, sculptures made of folded space-time, paintings created with the aurora of dying stars. All lost when Echo's people transcended physical existence, leaving only this one transformed remnant to wander the cosmos in search of something it could no longer remember. "But you remember now," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. You remember what it was like to create beauty instead of destruction, to connect instead of consuming. The presence that had terrorized the galaxy began to shift, its dimensional architecture realigning as it struggled to return to patterns it had abandoned eons ago. The process was painful, reality bending and warping around its transformation, but for the first time in millions of years, Echo was choosing to change rather than simply existing as an unchanging force of entropy. As dawn began to break over the observatory, Sarah realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented: the redemption of a cosmic horror through the simple power of human compassion. But she also knew that Echo's healing had only just begun, and the real test would come when it tried to find its place in a universe it had spent eons destroying. 6 months after first contact, the Galactic Defense Council convened once again on Arcturus Station. The same delegates who had gathered in despair now sat in uncomfortable confusion, studying reports that defied everything they thought they understood about the universe. Admiral Zeftar stood before the holographic displays, but instead of showing destruction and death, the screens now displayed images that challenged their comprehension. Where dead systems had once marked Echo's passage, new phenomena had begun to appear. Nebulae sculpted into impossible geometric patterns, asteroid fields arranged in mathematical sequences that resembled music when translated into audio, and most disturbing of all, several barren worlds had begun sprouting entirely new forms of life. "The readings are confirmed," Dr. Velen announced, her 3 heads working in perfect synchronization as she processed the data. "The entity we designated as hostile has not only ceased its destructive activities, but appears to be actively engaged in creative endeavors." Commander Throck shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. "My reconnaissance fleets report the same anomalies. Dead worlds are blooming with vegetation that shouldn't be able to exist. The creature has somehow created plant life that photosynthesizes using quantum radiation instead of starlight." "It's not just plants," added Captain Mordun, his voice carrying a note of wonder that none of them had heard in months. "We've detected new mineral formations with properties that our physicists insist are impossible. Crystals that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, metals that conduct emotion as easily as electricity." General Kexhigh's serpentine form coiled with agitation. "This makes no sense. How does an entity go from being an unstoppable force of destruction to, what? A cosmic gardener?" High Priestess Yara raised her staff, its crystal tip glowing brighter than usual. "Perhaps the ancient texts were incomplete. The prophecies speak of the great devourer, but they also mention a time of renewal that follows the darkest hour. What if this being's destructive phase was not its true nature, but a symptom of some greater affliction?" Ambassador Quinn's translucent form shimmered with curiosity. "The ethereal collective has attempted to make contact with the entity. Our most sensitive telepaths report unusual sensations. It seems to be experiencing emotions that we previously believed it was incapable of processing." "Emotions?" Admiral Zeftar leaned forward. "What kind of emotions?" "Loneliness," Quinn replied softly. "Profound, ancient loneliness, and something else, guilt. It appears to be actively working to undo some of the damage it caused during its destructive period." The Relani delegate buzzed her wings in agitation. "Our observation posts have recorded it visiting the sites of its previous attacks. Where it once obliterated entire ecosystems, it now seems to be attempting to restore them. The process is unprecedented." Dr. Velen pulled up a detailed scan of the Kepler system, where Echo had destroyed 2 colonies just 8 months earlier. "Look at this data. The entity has somehow reconstructed both planets from quantum memory patterns, not just the geological structures, but the biological systems as well. It's as if it recorded everything it destroyed and is now playing it back in reverse." "That's impossible," Commander Throck growled. Once something is unmade at the quantum level, it cannot be restored. The information is lost to entropy. Apparently not, Dr. Valin continued. The entity seems to exist partially outside our understanding of time. It may have access to temporal states that we consider permanently inaccessible. Admiral Zeftar studied the images of restored worlds, perfect down to individual trees and rock formations. But why? What changed? What could possibly motivate a cosmic predator to become a cosmic healer? We may have an answer to that, Captain Morden said, activating a communication link. We've been monitoring transmissions from the Terran system. It appears that one of their scientists has been in regular contact with the entity. The main display shifted to show Earth, its blue marble surface serene in the starlight. A secondary screen displayed audio waveforms and communication logs from the Arecibo Observatory. Dr. Sarah Chen, a human astrophysicist, has been broadcasting to the entity daily for the past 6 months, Mordun continued. The conversations are unique. He played a recording that left the assembled delegates stunned. Sarah's voice came through clearly, warm and conversational, as if she were talking to an old friend rather than a cosmic horror. Good morning, Echo. I brought those chocolate chip cookies I mentioned yesterday. I know you can't eat them in the traditional sense, but I thought you might enjoy experiencing the way the chocolate and vanilla flavors complement each other. It's like how different musical notes create harmony when they're combined properly. The response that followed was beyond their comprehension. Not words, but concepts that somehow conveyed gratitude, curiosity, and something that could only be described as affection. She's been teaching it, Dr. Velen breathed in amazement. This human has been educating a trans-dimensional entity about companionship, sharing, and emotional connection. It gets more interesting, Morden continued. The entity has been learning human cultural concepts at an exponential rate. Our linguistic analysts believe it has already absorbed the equivalent of several university educations through these daily conversations. General Kexhigh's laugh was bitter. So a primitive human has accomplished what our greatest minds could not. She's domesticated the ultimate predator with snacks and small talk. It's not domestication, Ambassador Quinn corrected gently. It's rehabilitation. This being was suffering from a form of cosmic trauma, isolated for so long that it had forgotten how to exist without destroying. The human's approach wasn't to fight or flee, it was to heal. High Priestess Yara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The ancient texts speak of the healing touch that comes not from power, but from compassion. We assumed it referred to divine intervention, but perhaps it meant something far more simple, the willingness of one being to care for another's pain. The delegates sat in silence, processing the implications. Their combined civilizations, with all their advanced technology and sophisticated military strategies, had been helpless against Echo's destructive rampage. But a single human with nothing more than snacks and genuine kindness had achieved what seemed impossible. There's more, Dr. Velen announced, pulling up new data streams. The entity has begun creating what can only be described as gifts. Look at these readings from the Sol system. The display showed Earth surrounded by impossible structures, rings of crystallized music that played melodies when solar wind passed through them, aurora patterns that spelled out mathematical poems in a dozen human languages, and most remarkably, a small artificial moon that seemed to exist primarily to provide spectacular sunsets for Earth's population. It's trying to show appreciation, Commander Throck said in disbelief. The most powerful force in the galaxy is making pretty lights for humans because one of them was nice to it. The psychological implications are staggering, Dr. Valin continued. This suggests that the entity's destructive behavior was not inherent to its nature, but was instead a response to prolonged isolation and trauma. When presented with genuine care and connection, it immediately began exhibiting prosocial behaviors. Admiral Zeftar studied the reports with growing amazement. Do we have any indication of its current intentions? Is the galaxy safe? More than safe, Captain Mordun replied. Our deep space monitoring stations report that the entity has begun actively protecting systems from natural disasters. Last week, it prevented a gamma-ray burst from sterilizing the Antares colonies by somehow bending space-time to redirect the radiation into uninhabited space. It's becoming a guardian, Ambassador Quinn realized. The destroyer has transformed into a protector. High Priestess Yara closed her eyes in meditation. The cycle completes itself. Destruction gives way to creation. Isolation gives way to connection. Despair gives way to hope. The human understood what we could not, that sometimes the greatest monsters are simply beings in the deepest pain. The Rilani delegates' compound eyes reflected the starlight streaming through the station's viewports. What happens now? How do we interact with an entity that could erase us from existence but chooses instead to garden dead worlds and create cosmic art? Carefully, Admiral Zeftar said. And perhaps we should ask Dr. Chen for advice. She seems to have developed the most successful diplomatic relationship with a trans-dimensional being in galactic history. Dr. Velen smiled, an expression that her three heads performed in perfect synchronization. I've already prepared a formal invitation for her to address this council, though I suspect she'll ask if she can bring cookies for everyone. Commander Throck actually chuckled at that, a sound that surprised him as much as it did the others. After what we've witnessed, I'd be honored to share cookies with the human who saved the galaxy with snacks and kindness. As the council session concluded, the delegates found themselves facing a universe transformed not by superior technology or military might, but by the simple human insight that every being, no matter how alien or powerful, needed connection and care. The cosmic horror that had threatened to end all civilized life had become their most powerful protector, all because one graduate student had offered to share her midnight snacks. In the depths of space, Echo continued its work, carefully tending to wounded worlds and broken systems, always listening for Sarah's daily broadcasts from Earth. The ancient loneliness that had driven it to destroy was healing, replaced by something it had thought lost forever, the joy of belonging, of being understood, of having a friend who looked forward to spending time together. The ultimate predator had discovered something more satisfying than consumption: creation, connection, and the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with someone who cared. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or weapons or even divine intervention. Sometimes it was just kindness. And in a small observatory on a blue planet in an unremarkable star system, Sarah Chen smiled as she unwrapped another package of cheese crackers, ready for her nightly conversation with the friend she had found among the stars. The universe was vast and often cold, but it was no longer empty. Someone was listening, someone cared, and that made all the difference. Echo had taught her something profound in return for her simple gestures of friendship: that love, in all its forms, was the most fundamental force in creation. Not the love of conquest or possession, but the love of understanding, acceptance, and shared joy in existence itself. The galaxy was safe, not because its greatest threat had been destroyed, but because it had been healed. And healing, they had learned, began with the simple act of reaching out to touch another being's loneliness and saying, "You don't have to be alone anymore."